Welcome to this edition of the Iowa blog. We are continuing our presentation of the Mikra of Sukah. And the advantage here is that we have 8 days to learn all about it and to discern as much as it is possible from Yahweh's testimony. And so far, it has been an enlightening experience. If you have been a witness to all of these programs, you know more than has anyone about the purpose and timing of the fulfillment of Chag Sukah than anyone in human history. And this is important because, as we have deduced, Sukah is about returning us to the Gan Eden, the Garden of Great Joy. It is about camping out with God and being under His protection and His covering. And it is therefore a presentation of life coming full circle, of the first two humans created in God's image, actually with Adam created in Yahweh's image, and we have Chawa created out of Adam. They were the first to enjoy the garden, and they made a mess of things. And we have spent now a number of programs speaking of what God offered, what we'll be returning to, and why it was that the first two humans to experience the garden bungled it, and why they were booted out, and what they had to say as a result, and the prophetic implications of Chawa wanting to be a mother goddess, and how she twisted God's testimony to serve her purpose in this regard, and was able to beguile a man who should have known better but didn't. And then how they went off to blame everyone except never accepting responsibility for their own actions. And then God's response to them, which wasn't tolerant, it wasn't kind, it wasn't generous, it wasn't forgiving. So if you're expecting God to be forgiving, you ought to look at what happened in Eden, because that is where we're going back, and God's not going to behave any differently than He did 6,000 years ago. He is establishing a standard, and you can either accept it or reject it. But if you reject it and try to twist it, as Chawa did, and Adam went right along with it, you will be expelled or you will be excluded in the first place. And if you're unwilling to take responsibility for your actions, you won't even be able to sniff anywhere near that garden. If you're uncomfortable being exposed to God, nudity freaks you out because you're lost in religious corruption. You're not going in. You don't have to worry about it. God's not going to make you feel uncomfortable or anybody feel uncomfortable with you, and you'll just simply be excluded. So this is what we've learned so far. It's a powerful lesson, how the 7 steps that we walk to God end in a return to Eden. And the first 3 begin with a fulfillment of Pesach Matzah and Bakodim, which is when Dod came back in his second of 3 lives in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, to serve as the Passover lamb, to carry our guilt into Sheol on Matzah, and to pave the way for us to be part of God's family on Bakodim. Also that we could experience this upcoming Shabua harvest of standing grain. And then we approach Chag Sukah, this integrated celebration of Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukah, all being fulfilled in year 6000 Yah, which is 2033, just 8 years from now. So we're going to continue to read about what God has to say about this time, of this work of His team, as God likes to work through men to accomplish His goals, and they will be very active during the fulfillment of Chag Matzah. So speaking of Chag Matzah, the Torah reveals, during the first and foremost day, there is a set apart invitation to be called out and meet. It is a mikra. It's a welcoming summons to read and recite, to call out and pronounce the name, to proclaim the purpose of the relationship. It is a compound of my, to ponder the implications of, and kara, inviting and summoning, meeting and greeting, calling out and proclaiming, reading and reciting. Well, now we know the purpose of the day, don't we? And we know that this time is set apart. Set apart would mean it is uncommon. That would mean that it's non-religious. Religion is the single most common thing in the world. That would mean that it's not political, it's not patriotic, it's not militant, it's not conspiratorial, because those things are also common. You know, I receive criticism regularly and say, you know, there's no chance you could be right and 1,000 scholars wrong, or 2 billion Muslims are wrong and you're right about Islam. And my response is that truth has never been popular. If you took a poll on religion in ancient Greece, Dionysus and Zeus would be God. Athena would be a goddess. If you did it back in Babylon, then the vote would be essentially unanimous that Bel would be God, Tammuz would be his son, and Asherah, Astarte, would be the queen of heaven and the mother of God. You know, if you did it in Egypt, the gods would have different names like Ra, Osiris, Isis. And so religious gods have always been popular. You know, when Elia was asked to rebuke the religious and political establishment of Israel 2,880 years ago, he recognized that it was one against 850 just among the prophets and priests of Baal, the Lord, and Asherah, the mother goddess. So if you are thinking that you're in there, you're right because the majority agree with you, then I can assure you, according to God, you'd be wrong. If you're popular, if you're in a popular group, if you're part of the majority, you're wrong. According to God. And my guess is he probably knows. Anything associated with the malakas, the spiritual counselor, the heavenly messengers, duties you should not engage in or try to profit from. Kara called out Leviticus 23:35. We read about this same thing in our review, didn't we, of Kippurim? And we tried to analyze what Malaka might be. For those who would like to know how I go about rendering the Word of God, is that I am opposed to religious renderings. And they want to render Malaka, Abolah, and then Asha as work. Because they want to render Malaka as if it were not the feminine of Malak. Malak is one of the most common words in the Hebrew lexicon. It's used hundreds upon hundreds of times, and its meaning is clear and non-negotiable. A malak is a spiritual messenger. It's a heavenly envoy. These are the messengers and envoys that Yahweh dispatches to communicate his message. Sometimes they represent Yahweh directly. Sometimes they do things that Yahweh once accomplished in our 3D realm. They're eternal beings, quite powerful beings, and they honor what God once achieved. And because the word simply means messenger, we are in a position to recognize that there are also human messengers. And you could combine the realization that God speaks of them very often as his heavenly envoys, his spiritual messengers, and then you can deduce, okay, there is a malak, and the term is sometimes applied to men. There is a malak who is imbued with the seven spirits of Yahweh. That would combine these two things, wouldn't it? And maybe that is the reason we deduced that Malak was made Malaka, because the Choder is imbued with the seven spirits of Yahweh. Ruach, spirit, is a feminine noun in Hebrew, and all of the attributes that are ascribed from those seven spirits are feminine in nature, with the exception of Yahweh. His name is the first spirit afforded to the Choder is the spirit of Yahweh. But after that, each of the concepts is rendered in the feminine. And so the Malaka, under that circumstance, since there is no one in human history that has been afforded the seven spirits of Yahweh, would naturally be the Choder. And the reason that the Choder would be given the seven spirits of Yahweh, and the reason that Yahweh would say, as we're trying to understand the proper fulfillment and the intent of Sukah, and it has never been explained in a way that made sense prior. Holding up a wrinkly, sour piece of fruit that has no value at all, and three other branches, is just absurd. If you think that's it, then you missed it. If you think that it's living out there exposed in a hut, then you've missed it, because God doesn't say he wants you to do that. And because the word Sukah means to be enclosed, to be protected. And so you're more vulnerable and more exposed when you're out in the elements under a thin piece of cloth than you are when you're in your home. No, Sukah is about a return to the Gan Eden, and Gan, based on Ganan, conveys exactly the same concepts: being protected, being enclosed, being covered and surrounded by God. That's the purpose of Sukah. So you've never heard it presented like this before, nor have you ever heard anybody explain that Sukah is a return to Eden. And last night's program was probably the most inspirational we have done in these 10 months, where I went through everything that we came to know about Eden, and particularly of Chava and Adam in Eden and their relationship or lack thereof with Yahweh. And it was an extraordinary experience, where every single element of that story applied prophetically to something we are dealing with today. And such an enlightening learning experience. And so the person that can equate Sukah with its intent, a return to Eden, and explain how those conditions in Eden will be reprised again as we return to Eden, would be doing the work of heaven's messenger, wouldn't he? And if he is imbued with the seven spirits of Yahweh, to understand what no one has perceived previously and to be able to communicate it to you as he did last night, then that work would be special. And then Yahweh would say, don't interfere with them, because there are numerous people that are trying to do that very thing. And God's warning is, do not interfere. My seventh Ruach are empowered to make this happen, to communicate what you need to know to capitalize upon Sukah. And of course, Abadah is a Hebrew word for work, duties, service, expenditure of energy and effort. So if you wanted to ignore the fact that Malaka is simply the feminine of Malak, and to render it as work, as the religious publications want to do, it would anything or everything work, do not do. So no. I don't know why people can't think It is like the Mother God is out now saying that Zeroah is cannot be a person; it's simply an arm. But it's used throughout the Torah to describe the Passover lamb, and lambs don't have arms. Yahweh uses it in the 89th Mizmor as a title to describe his beloved son in parts of that song that's ascribed titles to Dod. And Dod was the Passover lamb, the sacrificial lamb who fulfilled Pesach. That's a fairly nice fit that you'd be rejecting if you want to just render Zeroah as arm. Oh, but maybe sometimes it means shoulder. Well, no, but shakam is the Hebrew word for shoulder, and why would you have a second one? Or how is Zeroah written? Does Zeroah have a verbal root? Does Zeroah have a verbal root, Rich?
It does, but I can't remember.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's written the same way, isn't it? It's Zerah.
Zerah, that's it.
And what does Zerah mean? To sow seeds.
Oh, that's right.
To sow seeds as a verb. It's to sow seeds such that they take root and grow and produce a productive harvest. Why, if you wanted to say arm, would you choose the word for seed and for sowing seeds? And it's the reason why Zerah is very often used to speak of offspring, because those seeds that are taking root grow such that they become children of the covenant. So Zerah speaks of offspring. Why would you choose a word that's based on that root to communicate that idea? The same thing is true here. Malach is an exceedingly common word throughout Hebrew, and it means messenger. And because of the context, it is usually associated with a heavenly messenger or a spiritual envoy. Because of the context, they are clearly part of Yahweh's Sabah, this command and control regime of spiritual and heavenly messengers and envoys that report to and do the work for Yahweh. We're told that there are large numbers of them, because if you are engaged doing something that's important to God, if you are asked and appointed to an important role, like the Zeroah, for example, of Yahweh, you are afforded thousands of these malach, and they protect you so that you don't stumble and fall. They protect your home, keeping all manner of deadly things away from it, from assassins, because, well, look at my case, I wrote the most convincing books ever to excoriate Islam, and Muslims almost universally kill those who do those sorts of things. And I wrote the first rendition of this well over 20 years ago. I have thousands of death threats and yet not a single strike. And here I am out in the open. I'm even telling people where I live. It's nothing you can do because of the malach. I hear we had a wonderful rainstorm last night because the malach did what the malach always do. I've lived in Hurricane Alley now for over a decade, and not so much as a strong breeze. Just what the malach do. So there's lots of them. And in the 91st Mizmor, Yahweh specifically says that there are thousands of them that are ascribed to those who do what he wants accomplished. So, malach, a messenger conveying heaven's message. When Solomon gave the Sermon on the Mount on Teruah, which is the day of the messenger, the day of the herald, he spoke of a Nakri, which is the observant foreigner speaking a different language, living in a different place. And he said that his voice would come out of the heavens. Think there's a connection?
Slightly.
That's all about understanding. You got to make these kinds of connections to understand. If you don't, you won't. So Malaka is Malak with a feminine ending. That does not make the individual or thing feminine. Yahweh has a Ruach spirit, doesn't make him girly. Every reference that Yahweh has to himself is either father, or he uses masculine titles, or he refers to himself as masculine singular in every actionable verb. So, even Yahweh's name, it has the ah ending, but doesn't make it a feminine noun. This is describing really the Ruach's influence on this messenger, which is why it is Malaka. So you'd make that connection. And it says anything associated with Kol, the Malakas, the maternal, this messenger, this spiritual counselor's duties, you should not engage in or try to profit from. You should not attempt to do. And the reason should be obvious. God is all in with this individual. It's the only person ever to have his 7 Ruach. And there are a lot of people who are trying to denounce him so that they can speak over him. And that's reprehensible from God's point of view, because we're out of time. It's only 8 years left before Yahweh returns. And he chose this person to convey what is in these books, what has been presented in these shows, what you heard last night. And if that is infringed upon, then there will be fewer people who make the correct decision to capitalize on what God is offering. So for 7 days, you should consistently approach and come near Korab. 7 days, because there's 7 Moed Mikre, there's 7 candles on that menorah that you see spinning. There's 7 epochs of human existence from the garden back to the garden, and then a celebration of life in the garden. So for 7 days, this Sheba, which means promise, you should consistently approach and come near Korab. You should present yourself. You should appear. You should advance, drawing close to the fiery light, Ishe. Ishe is now a feminine variation of Ish, fire. So this is a fire that is capable, if by the feminine connotation, of being productive in terms of giving birth unto Yahweh. This feminine manifestation of the fiery light unto Yahweh you are to approach. Now, this is another great example of the work of the Malaka. Prior to these programs, no one understood the meaning of Isha in this context. It was always rendered burnt offering. But the word doesn't mean burnt, and there's no connotation of an offering. It is simply, depending on how it is vocalized, it is either the Hebrew word for woman or the Hebrew word for fire. No burnt, no offering. And it doesn't mean present something as a present. It means you should be present and approach and come near, which is what Korab means. So the only intelligent way to render this request, and it permeates the Moed Mikre, it's presented in many of them, and God says that you should consistently approach and come near, presenting yourself before the feminine manifestation of the fiery light unto Yahweh. And here's the first time that you learned that that was the correct rendering of the text. But more importantly, what you learned is why you should do that. And we've shown, I think now, 3 occasions of the fire outside. Maybe we'll have another one late this afternoon if the rain continues to abate. We did get 2 lovely inches last night with some soft breezes. So who knows what will happen as we move through the afternoon. But the hurricane has passed by well to the north of us. Uh, what we've shared is that the reason that Yahweh encourages us to approach and to draw near this manifestation of the fiery light unto Yahweh is that fire is transformative. If we're going to be transformed into the covenant family, into the children of God, we must become more like God. And right now, we are three-dimensional constructs that are flawed because our bodies decay and because they have no meaningful longevity, and they're very weak compared to energy and light. And so God, as a spiritual being, is equivalent to light and to energy. And therefore, to be more like him, to be with him, he must transform us into that state. And what he's doing is he's taking the only part of us that has merit, which is our nephesh soul, which is compatible, more actually compatible with energy than the nephesh soul is compatible with a physical body. And the carrier of our nephesh soul, rather than being a decaying and limited physical body, is going to be essentially an unlimited and vastly more capable and empowered body comprised of, not physical body, but entity comprised of radiant energy and light. And if you look at a fire, it simply transforms physical organic material that is dead or dying, and it consumes that and transforms it into light and energy that reaches up and rises up toward Shamayim. A beautiful metaphor. It's just the perfect metaphor. You know, it purges. It is a treat for the nose. The smell of it is great. The treat for the ears with the snapping, the crackling. It's a treat for the eyes with the dancing light, the various colors. Wonderful for even our skin. It feels warm as we approach. It lightens the darkness so that our days can be extended, so we can read and communicate as a family after the sun sets. It can be used to purify water. It can be used to cook our food, to make it safer to eat and more flavorful. Just to hear now, as we're continuing to celebrate Sukah, I put some lamb chops over the grill for my friends and did a little Chef Day barbecue using fire to prepare the food, and it had terrific flavor because of us doing it. Much easier to eat, much more nourishing, much more flavorful. Fire does all of these things. And so it's like everything that God does. It's a perfect metaphor to describe how we go about approaching him. And that was Kara, called out, should never have been named, Leviticus 23:36. Then it says something that we don't read anywhere else. Now, if we don't read this anywhere else, then this is special. This is unique. You know, the celebration of Chag Matzah, Pesach Matzah and Makodim. It's how many days? 7, isn't it? First day is Pesach, second day is Matzah, third day is Bakodim, and we continue to eat symbolically and actually unyeasted bread for the entire 7 days. So we understand that we are unleavening our souls of religious and political guilt so that we appear perfect, because Dode is carrying that away and depositing it in Sheol. So it's a marvelous metaphor for all of that. Shabuah, which means sevens, is a single day. And then we have Chag Sukah, which is the day of Teruah, which is the day of days. There's so much that goes on Teruah that I swear God's going to have to make this day last a lot longer to get all of this in. And then we have Kippurim, when he returns with Dode after all of that's been accomplished during Teruah, so that we can then begin to return to Eden, which we'll do on the first day of Sukah. But Sukah has an 8th day after the 7th. You know why?
What was the question? I was reading something.
It is so unfair for me to do that to Rich, because this is not vacation time for Rich. Rich has probably 8 different screens and multiple duties where he's watching various streams and also monitoring audio levels and video levels and multiple cameras, and the lighting is a lot that goes on.
I've got vacation scheduled for sometime after 2033.
Yes, and he's also he says you're gonna tune in there, and he's also looking at the comments that are being made online, because if there's something wrong, they're going to say so. If there's something that's really resonating, he can post it, and so he's also monitoring the chat on one of the forums where I think we broadcast live to 8 or 9 different live streams.
10 streams.
Pardon?
10 streams.
10 different streams.
And some of those streams get doubled to capture the others. So there's about 12 or 15 total.
So 15 different live stream presentations of this program. And so it's a lot of different places where the action is happening, and Rich monitors all of that. 8, my friend, is the Hebrew symbol for eternity. And we see a legacy of that is the symbol even today, scientifically, for eternity. What is it? It is a figure 8 laid on its side. And the reason for that, you start here, you go here, and it just continues forever. And so it is the symbol for eternity, and it is an 8 laying down on its side. And so that is the message here, is that there's an 8th day to celebrate eternity. Now, what that means, in case you're curious, is that we humans had 3 40 periods, 40 times 50-year periods of celebrating of the Yobel that led to the 7th day. So let me explain. Adam and Chava were escorted out of the garden, kicking and screaming, complaining, lying to themselves and to God, and were held accountable. God did not show any forgiveness. They were told what they should not do. They did that thing, and they were escorted out of the garden. So you want to keep that in mind. You either agree to the terms that Yahweh has stated in the Torah to live with him or not. And he is not going to say, I'm going to make a special exception for you because you're kind of cute, or I like your heart. No, it's either accept his terms or not. So that occurred when you look at the genealogies within the Torah at 3968 BCE. 3968 BCE. Yobel speaks of a time of forgiving debts, of freeing slaves and indentured workers, and returning to the land. And they transpire every 7 times 7 years plus 1, which would be 50 years. It's a twice century celebration of what is essentially Shabuah. Shabuah is 7 times 7 plus 1 from matzah. So we have 40, which is the period of completing of an epic, typically of testing, which is used throughout the Torah to describe these periods. Take 40 times the 50 Yobel, you have 2,000 years. So 2,000 years, 40 Yobel, from 3968 BCE, when Adam and Chava were escorted out of the garden for non-compliance, if you will. With a very judgmental Yahweh. We find that 40 Yobel from then, we have Abraham and Yishak climbing Mount Moriah. And they did so with the idea of fulfilling Passover, but there was no lamb. And so during that discussion, Abraham says, God's going to provide the sacrifice. And when we get to the top and beginning to flesh out this whole drama, Yahweh says, "Oh, don't take the life of your son. I'm going to provide the lamb." And the inference is it's going to be my son that is the lamb. And we find that the lamb, the Al, was caught by his horns, which is the symbol of power and kingship, in the thickets. And that is the symbol for Dod. Dod was the Passover lamb, and Dod was the Son of God. And so that whole drama plays out as the dress rehearsal for the fulfillment of Passover and the narrative regarding how one becomes part of the covenant so that we can return to the garden occurred in 1968 BCE. That would be exactly 40 Yobel, or 2,000 years from 3968 BCE, and we can deduce that from the genealogies that are presented in the Torah. So if you go another 40 Yobel from 3968 BCE, recognizing there was no zero in the Roman Catholic or Roman calendars, you get to 33 CE. 33 CE happens to be the exact year that Dod, as Gabriel, told us that he would fulfill Chag Matzah in year 4000 Yah. That is exactly 40 Yobel from 1968 BCE. And with that being 33 CE, 40 Yobel from then brings us to 2033. And that is when the celebration of Chag Sukah will be fulfilled, beginning on the evening of Friday evening of the 23rd of September, and the 24th being the Shabbat of Teruah, and then Yom Kippurim on the 2nd at sunset, October 3rd of 2033, and then the beginning of Sukah, the first day of Sukah, on the 7th of October of 2033. Now, 2033 then would represent year 6,000 Yah. So from year 6,000 Yah to year 7,000 Yah would be this final celebration of camping out with God. We're going to camp out with God on earth for 1,000 years. And so the 7 days of Sukah represent the 7th millennia, and year 6,000 to year 7,000, where we camp out with God, sheltered by him. The earth returned to the conditions that existed in Eden. But that 1,000 years, what sounds like a long time, is nothing compared to eternity. And so what Yahweh is saying, by this 8th day, after you've celebrated the 7 days, and he made it 7 plus the 8th day, so we would know that it's not just 8 days, it's 7 days on earth celebrating Sukah, and then an 8th day where those who have been transformed into the covenant and are now, having been symbolically transformed by that fire, becoming spiritual, radiant, illuminated beings, we spend the 8th day eternity becoming infinitely empowered, infinitely enlightened, infinitely enriched. In fact, we go through 4 additional dimensions, taken through the dimension of time to the 5th, 6th dimension into the 7th dimension. That is what the 8th day represents. So during the 8th day, there exists for you to approach a set-apart invitation to be called out and meet. So the 7th day is also a mikra. That interesting? So we will celebrate it as a mikra. What is a mikra? Again, it is from mai, to ponder the implications of, and kara, which means to call out and to welcome, to invite and to summon, to read and to recite, to meet and to encounter one another. You should come at that time Present yourself and appear before Karab. You should approach and draw near. There is no question that that is what Karab means. It does not mean make a present. It doesn't mean offer a present. It means to be present before the feminine representation of the fiery light, which purifies, enlightens, and elevates, and most importantly, empowers. It is the transformative effect of that fire which presents us such that we become ever more like and can approach and exist in Yahweh's presence, doing so unto Yahweh. Kara, called out, should never have been called Leviticus 23:36. It is a time to show some discipline and restraint and meeting together, such that you do not engage in or try to profit from anything associated with the malakas, this spiritual messenger's duties or responsibilities. Kara, called out, again, never should have been called Leviticus 23:36. Well, marvelous reaffirmation. God is a great teacher. And so his strategy is he's going to tell us what he's going to tell us. He's going to tell us, and then he's going to tell us what he told us. And so we are reminded that this is a time that we should show some discipline and restraint and meeting together, and that we should not engage in or try to profit from anything associated with the Malaka. And you're free to do your own due diligence. Look it up. And you will see the lexicons try to parrot what has been in popular Bible translations through the ages. And if you do that, then there's no reason for you to do a translation. If all you're going to do is parrot what they have already provided, what's the purpose? There is none. If you can't apply some diligence, first, look at the oldest extant text, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Second, scrub every words of the diacritical Masoretic vowel pointing that occurred mostly in the 10th and 11th century to create the Masoretic text, so that rabbis could have a text that reflected their religion. Scrub it of that. Hebrew already has 5 vowels and 17 consonants. Didn't need their vowel pointing at all. And then look at every word that is written similarly. Then if there is a actionable root, go to that actionable root and see what it means, because it will define what that word is conveying. And you can even look at the way the word is written in terms of the letters themselves. So, for example, Malaka would be the mem is waters on the sea. Waters can convey that this person is a Gentile. Interesting. Waters on the sea can provide that there's going to be water associated with this person. Sacrifice of the Adam of Perah. Torrents of water released beneath the Temple Mount, dancing off the Temple Mount to cleanse and to purge, along with that sacrifice. The most important moment of the fulfillment of Sukah. And water is the ultimate solvent, cleansing in this regard. Water is also the source of life. Life came from water. God told us so, and we know so. So it is a source of mirth, of life, the ultimate solvent to cleanse us symbolically. It is associated with the Goy, and it is symbolic of what's going to happen on the outset of Teruah, as it is fulfilled as the first day of Sukah. Mem. The lamed is a shepherd's staff. It means that this individual is trying to guide God's flock, to protect God's flock, to reach out to God's flock, to nurture them. He's a person that's walking with God to accomplish this. And then you have the ain, which would be an eye, which says this is an important perspective for you to obtain. The kaf is an open hand, bearing a gift, something that is being offered for you to accept, or an open hand that can be protective, keeping harm away. And the hey ending is a person standing up, reaching up, pointing up to God. As we say, the word malak appears throughout the Torah many, many, many times, as it means messenger or spiritual and heavenly messenger. That is all that can be known about that word. There is nothing more to the word than what I have just shared with you. To render it any other way is just to capitulate with a religious interpretation. And so now you are compelled to say, who is the Malaka? Well, so you've got very few options, because you've got Yahweh that can be a benefit to you, but Yahweh's not in that fire, is he? Because you approach the fire to approach Yahweh. This fire is transformative, and so is the message of God. This fire makes no sense to you until somebody explains to you what the purpose is. You wouldn't even know that there is a Malaka, because it would be wrongly translated rather than transliterated, so you wouldn't even know what one was unless we were having this discussion now, would you? You would have no concept of what the purpose of Yahweh's Malak are unless they were explained to you, because it is rendered as angels in almost all text. But this time they want to make it ordinary work, but it's not the word for work. There are 5 Hebrew words for work, and it isn't among them. And so now you have to find out who is working on behalf of Yahweh, who has responsibilities with Yahweh at this time. And Yahweh is really clear. There are only 3 guys, all guys, not females, who are working with Yahweh during the fulfillment of Chag Sukah, beginning on Teruah. They are a bull, a ram, and a goat. And Yahweh presents this all the way through his story. And in particular, it's the role of the bull and the ram, Yada and Dod. And it is the very sacrifice that is being made by Yada, the bull, that enables the purification of the children of Yisrael, this remnant, so that they can endure in Yahweh's return with Dod. And it is that sacrifice that makes the determining factor as to who among this remnant of Yisrael gets to enter the celebration of Sukah when we are allowed back into the garden. The first person to ever tell you any of that is this very Malaka. And once we enter the millennial Shabbat, the Malaka's work continues, because everyone there will have known Yahweh for a matter of days. They will be babies. They need to be taught. And that is the work of the Malaka going forward. Don't interfere with that. It's essential work. Preparing for Yahweh's return, telling people when it's going to happen, what they need to do if they want to be part of it and to benefit from it. It's serious work. Don't interfere with that. We had gone 2,500 years without a single person explaining any of this. Yahweh's name, that his son, Dod, was the Savior and the Messiah, the Son of God. that the fulfillment of all of these events occurred on a date certain, that we're working on a 7,000 year calendar from Yahweh, that we can tell us exactly what date the Moed were fulfilled in the past, and they will be fulfilled going forward, so that you're there and can capitalize on these meetings, that the covenant has 5 terms and conditions and 5 benefits, and those benefits are fulfilled through the Moed Mikre. Nobody knew any of that. Without the work of the Malaka, there is no fulfillment of Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, or Sukah. It is all dependent on that work. And that's why Yahweh caused his choder to be the Malaka by giving him the 7 spirits, Ruach of Yahweh. He has duties. He has responsibilities. Kara called out. Should never have been called. Leviticus 23:36. So this is the first and only time Yahweh asks us to show some restraint, and he clearly wants us prepared to spend some quality time with him. This is the most wonderful time in all of human history, but we need to know what it is that we should and should not do. We can't be mucking things up, as so many are trying to do. Then God continues, these godly and specific, eternal witnesses to the appointments of Yahweh. I'm going to stop it there. It's obviously that's not a complete sentence, so we're going to go on from there. But that's Kara called out 23:37. And so Ele is godly. It is also specific. El is the Hebrew word for God or Almighty. And when it's written as El-eh, it's godly or specific. Moed is from Ed. It is from Ma and Ed. It means to ponder the implications of all things associated with a restoring witness, which would be the title of the Malaka, and also the eternal testimony. And so a Moed, which is used many times by Yahweh, beginning in the creation account, the 4th day of creation, the greater and lesser luminaries serve as signs of the Moed. Moed is synonymous with Mikra. Yahweh sometimes refers to his 7 annual meetings as Mikra, these invitations to be called out and meet with God, or Moed, the eternal restoring witnesses to the eternal appointments. He uses both words interchangeably. Here he's used Mikra in the previous sentence, and now Moed in this one. And so you could actually call Yahweh's 7 annual meetings Moed Mikra, couldn't you? There are invitations to be called out and meet, brought to you by the renewing witness regarding the eternal testimony. It's beautiful, isn't it? How descriptive God is regarding this. And then he says that these godly and specific eternal testimonies to the restoring witness are of Yahweh. So when Christians say, no, those are Jewish holidays, I don't think Yahweh's Jewish, is he?
No.
No. They're Yahweh's. And therefore to alter them is a bad thing to do. To run around in little huts with your 4 species is really stupid. Why not listen to what God said and do what he wants? Anyway, they are of Yahweh, which, to offer the benefits of the relationship, Asher, you're invited to attend and to proclaim them, to read and recite during them, accordingly as set apart and special Mikre invitations to be called out and to meet, for the purpose of approaching this feminine manifestation of the fiery light that purifies, enlightens, empowers, and elevates, according to Yahweh, to rise and to ascend, including a gift, a sacrifice, and a pouring out of the word day by day. Kara called out, should never have been called, Leviticus 23:37. Wow. Okay. That'll probably be the last sentence that we will read because, well, there was a lot going on there, was there not? There's a lot to unpack here. So let's just go back to the beginning of the sentence. These are godly and specific, restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. Moed of Yahweh, which to offer the benefits of the relationship, to show the correct, albeit narrow path to get the most out of life, Asher. You are Kara. Just in case you didn't know the basis of Kara, that you didn't know that Mikra was based upon the verbal root Kara, God makes it really clear to us. These are invitations from God to meet, to attend, and to proclaim. You're summoned to be welcomed into God's presence during them, consistently called out through them, a time to read and recite. Oh, some books here called Yada Yahweh you might want to consider. To announce, to explain. Accordingly as, there's that word again, Kodesh, set apart and special. These are things that cannot be common. They cannot be religious. They cannot be political. They cannot be conspiratorial. They cannot be patriotic. They cannot be common. They must be special. They must be set apart from the garbage ideas of humankind unto Yahweh. They are set apart. They are special. Mikra, that is the plural of Mikra. So the Moed are Mikra and Mikre in the plural. They're invitations to be called out and meet. And now we have Mikre defined by the verb that comprises the word Kara. And we know the correlation now between Moed and Mikra, all explained in this statement. Quite a gift to us. These are invitations to be called out and meet. The purpose of them is to approach, to draw near, presenting oneself before the feminine manifestation of the fiery light, purifying, enlightening, elevating, empowering, according to Yahweh. The very purpose of these Moed is to approach this light. Do you think maybe there's a correlation between that and the description of the fourth day of creation? When you have the sun presented as the greater luminary, that would be Dode, and having his light reflected by the lesser luminary, moon, which would be Yada, during the time of darkness, so that you would perceive them as signs for the Mikre, and the sun is this giant big fireball, isn't it? Yep. Source of life on this planet, in terms of continuance of life. Life was created by God, but the continuance of life is only possible because of that sun.
Yes.
Big, giant fireball in the sky. And Yahweh says that his son's seat of authority and honor, power, prestige will be as brilliant as the sun upon his return. This is, by the way, also the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, the specific throne that he is describing. And it is now the lesser luminary that is reflecting that and telling you that the correlation is that if you want to celebrate these Moed appropriately, you're going to approach this fiery light so that you are properly enlightened, purified, elevated, and empowered, transformed from physical bodies, because there is no such thing as bodily resurrection. That would be counterproductive. We must go from being physical beings trapped in 3 dimensions to 7-dimensional beings that are comprised of energy and light if we're going to explore the 2 trillion galaxies out there that are just the known galaxies, and then explore and have an appreciation for the 2 dimensions that mankind can't even perceive at this point, which we call dark energy and dark matter. All of that is being made available to us. And the very purpose of these annual meetings is to transform us in this way. So the very intent, the core message here is you need to approach that fiery light so that you can be transformed, so that your soul goes from being inside of a decaying and limited physical body and is carried by energy and light, which is timeless. Timeful would be a more accurate rendering, and travel throughout the universe. Be perfect. Light is something that eliminates all darkness, does it not? All of this is according to Yahweh. And what does he say? He wants it to Olah. Olah means to rise. Again, the dunderheads who present your translations, if you're looking at a Bible, will make Olah a burnt offering. And they've already got a Isha rendered as an offering by fire, and burnt offering, it's got like God stuttering. And then they change Kara from being present to offering a present. It just goes on, and you say, oh my God, what's wrong with people? Why can't they think? All of the clues are there. The words are explained. We're even told what these words mean. They're used everywhere. And it's obvious that Isha is either fire or feminine. That's all the word can possibly mean. And Olah is written identically to the verb Allah. Now, that's not with a aleph, but with an ain. And with the ain, Allah means to rise. It is a verb that means to rise. So what does that fire do? It elevates us. It enables us to arise, to ascend, to be withdrawn, to be lifted up, to be carried away, just like the warmth and light and smoke of that fire rise up to the heavens. That's why it's such a beautiful metaphor. And it says that all of this is a gift. It's being given to you. Nothing is being asked from you. It is a gift, this opportunity to rise, to be transformed, to be empowered, to be enabled is a gift being offered to you. It is a sacrifice that is poured out of the word day by day. That's what I'm doing for you right now. I'm offering you this gift. God has authorized me to offer it to you, and I'm doing so. I'm explaining it, putting you in a position where you can capitalize upon it. And I'm even making that sacrifice as the Adam of Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is a productive bull on Teru, the first day of Chag Sukah, so that whatever religious residue you have left over is expunged, purified, so that you too can rise. And all of this is deduced from a singular place, the very word of God. So those are some very powerful insights for us to ponder. And I think at this point we will conclude this program because we have come so far. We have learned so much, and we will carry on again later today. I thank you all for listening. Good day.